Though my parents lived in New York for many years, their European roots define them. My Greek mother boasted about the blueness of the Aegean, and my father praised the Swiss Alps. But for me, none of Europe's shrines could compete with a place that was only several blocks from my home. Central Park is where my brother and I found native soil. Years later, Central Park's history and presence still fascinate me. A few days ago, I was sitting on a bench near the boat pond, trying to imagine my surroundings as they looked a century ago, without asphalt or car traffic. Back then, the park was stocked with wild deer, and its meadows were home to sheep and horned cattle. There were gilded bird cages and children driving goat-drawn carriages. My thoughts were in this Victorian park when a woman with a team of dogs caught my attention.
Come. Come.
Why would a professional dog walker carry such a big backpack? Then I see the backpack is loaded with laundry and blankets. Maybe it was her air of well-being that made me curious. When I introduced myself, she said her name was Maggie. Then she calmly said that she'd been expecting me, that she had extrasensory perception, and had been communicating with me for several days. The next morning, I find myself near Bethesda Fountain, looking for Maggie.
Sometimes I forget I have a face. I'm so used to doing this without a fountain. I'm Hera, sister of Zeus. Now, if Zeus and Jupiter are the same, that'll be a relief. But in Stairway to Heaven, there's a little, and did you know your stairway lies on the whispering wind? The whispering wind is the voices, the radio control. Jupiter controls the radio waves.
Things don't necessarily get clearer to me the more Maggie explains them, but I managed to piece this much together. She claims her father was the Hollywood movie star, Robert Ryan. She once had an apartment on the Upper West Side with a roommate named P. Green Palmer. She mentions a horse named Tangle, and having once worked in Central Park as a carriage driver. Her oldest son, Michael, was born in 1969. The quintuplets, Justin, Elizabeth, two Tracys, and Isidore, were born sometime later. When I ask her who her husband was, she says his name is Jupiter.
Prince William! Oh, she wants all of it. Put a lid on it, Mary.
Maggie tells me that she's from the class of '86. That's the year she became homeless and took to the streets with all her dogs.
After a few months on the street, or maybe after a year and a half or two on the street, I'd meet these people who had shown up on the street the same time I had, and I noticed that we had pretty much evolved to a certain level whereby we weren't doing soup kitchens anymore, and we pretty much had a network of friends and support system, and our clothes came from reliable Upper East Side garbage, and we had reliable Upper East Side dumpsters to dive, and we pretty much had ourselves worked into a fairly comfortable situation. We weren't beleaguered and lost and angry anymore. We pretty much just sort of taking a breath and gearing up for the next phase, I guess.
The next time I see Maggie, she's just found another mouth to feed. A pit bull whom she's named Sterling Silver. I wonder how Maggie supports herself and all her dogs. She says she relies on the kindness of strangers, but she also mentions friends who live on the Upper East Side. Does Jupiter pay alimony? In any case, when Maggie invites me to go to the ASPCA with her to get a license for Sterling, I offer to pay for it. She accepts.
So we have an unknown vaccination history. But do you notice any complaints other than his skin problem? He's acting like a normal dog to you?
Yes, he's very nice. He's Sterling.
That's why his name is Sterling?
That's right. He's so amenable to suggestions. He's easy to handle. He's very nice, and he likes me. He prefers me to other people.
He seems like he gets along with dogs. It's important.
Mm-hmm. Oh, he kissed me. What is your name?
I'm Dr. Krummenauer.
While Maggie was filling out the application forms at the front desk, I noticed that she gave her current address as 865 Madison Avenue. She didn't specify that she lives on the steps of St. James Church.
Make little pops! Boris! Make little pops. Make little pops. I'm listening to the news. The traffic report is very funny. Michael Patrick was in the traffic pattern last night. He just went by and said, "Don't go." So I'm not going to go into all the cosmic gizmos that are directing traffic on planet Earth.
Maggie keeps telling me that she spots her children walking in the park or sitting in the back of a passing car. But she says she's never permitted to talk to them directly, only telepathically. Maggie also believes that the radio she listens to transmits personal messages from Jupiter. It's clear to me that Maggie is preoccupied by extrasensory perception, so I ask her to explain it further.
It's to be in a position of having a very finely tuned understanding of other people and what they want and how they feel they can achieve their goals relative to your goals, so that we can all just like move this everlasting peace grid just down that much closer to the earth. It eventually covers the earth so that there's peace. It's a grid, but you have to bring it down with your brains. What did I used to call a matrix or a grid? I think they're similar, aren't they? Matrix. She's the daughter of a tricky one. We're in the shadow of the living room.
The shadow of the living room. What living room? I'm fascinated by Maggie's language, but I also feel like I'm in a foreign country without my phrase book. The more cryptic her remarks, the more I strain to decipher them. I can't see the shadow of the living room. I don't know where or who Jupiter is, but I don't think these phrases are arbitrary. I think Maggie is trying to tell me something. It can be complicated to visit someone who roams 843 acres. Today I can't find Maggie, but I'm struck by how things and people are altered inside Central Park. The stage is huge and open. Sometimes the audience becomes the spectacle.
So, I will burn the flag in protest. In protest. Liberté, fraternité, égalité for tout le monde. For everybody or nobody. Remember the French Revolution. Off with the heads. Hallelujah.
Found and repaired a new umbrella. Want to see my new umbrella?
Yeah.
Hi, guys. And a bee is buzzing above us. Busy, 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 busy. She's odd. I's odd. Hey, you got it! You got it! Forrest got it! The rat! Silver.
Oh, that is wonderful. Boy, sterling silver, that really just completes the look.
Yes. Stop it! No! Stop it!
Anyway, there's a man in the park who eats these things. He's been eating rats and pigeons for years. He lives up above the 80s. I'm taking this away from dogs. Okay, we're putting this in with the trophies. It's just a little old farm, because it isn't a very big farm. Kind of looks like Wisconsin. You know, these trees. There happens to be a city down there, but...
Maggie sees things that I don't. But there's a dark side to this ability of hers. I've learned, for instance, that she grew up with a family on Long Island. But she insists that the couple who raised her aren't her real parents. she was switched with another baby at birth.
The truth of the circumstances around my birth, after I'd been shifted from my birth parents to this other set of parents and these other circumstances, were to create the symptoms of schizophrenia, so that my thinking and my actions would render me invalid and therefore not capable of handling anything like an inheritance. And the matter of hearing voices rather than being considered a gift would be considered a fault. I've been framed. I've been framed. And then I met this Bobby, who had been adopted by the Kennedy family during the war. And the things that happened to her validated in my own mind the suspicion that the link I have to an illustrious family is a real one.
Banana hates me. You mention my name and show my picture to Joe Banana. I said, Joe Banana, you are dead. That's the truth. And you ask the preacher, that's exactly what I used to tell Sam Giancano before he was killed. I used to be on stage out in Vegas some. You ask the preacher, that's why he hated me. You're not fit for a mother. I was on stage and I had a comedy act, similar to Richard Pryor's. And the preacher took it the wrong way. I was undercover, working as a waitress and singing and telling dirty jokes on stage so I could see and hear what was going on and know which mafia chiefs fit what face, what names, and who got together. And he ruined the whole thing. They would come in and drag me off the stage. I'm not kidding you. And I don't dance nude because, see, this happened because of who I really am. Because I escaped Auschwitz, I shouldn't escape Auschwitz. Maybe it was one of these books.
Sam Giancano, Joe Bonanno, Auschwitz, that's not all. Bobby also tells me that before being adopted by the Kennedy family, she lived with either her father, Albert Einstein, in Switzerland, or with her mother, Greta Garbo, in New York.
That's my hands, that's me.
I'm fascinated by these stories, but troubled as well.
Come on, come on, come on, come on.
These are dense plots in which Maggie and Bobby appear as heroines, but also as victims. Since arriving in New York, Bobby has spent her entire savings phoning the FBI 5 to 10 times a day, asking for her job back. It's a high price to pay for her convictions.
People, they would die.
Come down the road, Daddy. Come down.
Can we stay up here?
Yeah. Going the beacon.
I go to the Catskills for a vacation with my family.
I die in the car. Die. Yeah.
I'm 100 miles from Central Park, but Maggie's enigma will not release me. At our first meeting, she said she'd been expecting me. How was I selected to hear Maggie's riddles? Why does she believe that Robert Ryan is her father? And where are her children? I wonder if it's appropriate for me to pursue these questions. Then a coincidence makes me forget my misgivings. While visiting friends one day, I admire a carved wooden bench on their front porch. I'm told that it was a gift from Robert Ryan's daughter. Did they once know Maggie? I press for more information, but it was 20 years ago and all pretty vague. They tell me Robert Ryan used to live in the Dakota, the legendary building whose Gothic spires cast shadows on Central Park. Roman Polanski filmed Rosemary's Baby here. and John Lennon was murdered at its doorstep.
Nobody suffers over squirrels like these dogs. One, Boris! Where is that dog? That's why they're crying. I'm missing Boris! I almost lost a finger. Okay, we'll leave without Boris and hope that he finds a good home. Boris! Boris Machanratty, the king of all dogs. You're going to be a mommy and you're running around looking for rats. You're going to teach those babies. They're going to be good ratters too. They're really going to be good ratters.
I begin to wonder if I've romanticized Maggie's outdoor life. With the cold weather approaching, how will Maggie keep herself and all her dogs from freezing to death? I'm becoming less patient with Maggie.
This is an official. I'm an official in the Vatican Army. I'm General Disturbance.
Come on now, come on! Vas-y, vas-y, la France! Ah non, la France, c'est de l'autre côté.
For the next few weeks, I try to convince Maggie to leave the park and find an apartment.
Come on, now you're there, come on!
I contact city and private agencies that work with the homeless. They already know Maggie. It seems that nothing will budge Maggie from her sacred ground or separate her from her dogs. When Maggie does move, it's to a new camp under a bridge in Central Park. It's here, in late October, that Mickelittle's puppies are born.
Good. She's trying to hide him. See, that's why she wanted to dig a hole. She wants to hide him, even from you, Maggie, you know, as close as she is to you. This is new, and that's what she's supposed to do, hide him. See, it checkers. Is it all right? Is it alive? Will she let you? Is it okay?
Yes, just
Put him around here. There. Oh, it's afterbirth.
kicking, but
It's afterbirth?
the afterbirth out.
Well, just wait then.
Little girl. Hail Britannia. Lisa, could it be? That's Saturna. That's Saturna. Oh, she's a little beauty too. And she's the daughter of Boris. She has little big fat dew claws. Like Boris, just like Daddy. Just like her daddy. Hebe. She looks a lot like Sterling Silver's markings, but she has Boris's nose. Oh, she is so beautiful. She looks like my daughter, Elizabeth. You do, you look like Elizabeth. I hope Elizabeth becomes your new mommy. Wouldn't that be fun to be with somebody who looks like a Valkyrie?
It doesn't entirely surprise me that the litter is christened after Greek divinities, such as Herculesa, Saturna, and Hebe. Maggie promptly spins myths around her newborns, making them puppies, children, and goddesses all at once. The birth seems to spark Maggie's mind, but it also brings back phantoms from her past.
One particular thing about remembering being kidnapped that always impressed me, and I just figured out this morning what it was. When this nurse, or whatever she was, walked into the nursery, and I was astrally projected on the ceiling, having a stomach ache, the one thing I really noticed was the stitchery, or the stitching of the hem in her uniform, and how the hem had been folded over double, or once and a half, with little teeny frays visible through the white fabric. And it was very starched, and the stitching was very precise. And that was her hem. And the man who raised me was the early Greek god Hemera, the early god of the dawn. Hem era. And yesterday when we were all standing around in that amphitheater type arrangement at the back of the tunnel, a man who looked just like him walked by, and he was smiling at the fact that so many people were standing around all at once in this Elizabethan setting.
Who is this Hemera who kidnapped Maggie when she was several days old? Do he and Jupiter correspond to real people? Maggie's world reminds me of the Greek myths my mother used to read to me. I think of the murky afterworld called Erebus, where souls take refuge after being separated from their bodies and their earthly existence. These trees are fall scenery to me, but Maggie populates them with spirits and voices. I'm in Central Park. Maggie is in Erebus.
Boy, that was good, huh? I mean, y'all getting too used to people moving.
Come on, Boris. Boris! He'll come.
It's the onset of the coldest December in New York City's recorded history. So cold that on the anniversary of John Lennon's murder, only a handful attend his memorial. I invite Maggie to the Lennon vigil, but she sees no reason to mourn him. She has more recent news of John Lennon.
What year was that, 1980? When he was dead about 5 years. On his birthday, there was an article in some Florida paper about his having been dead 5 years, but there was also an article on the back of that page about somebody who was doing furniture repair of elegant old Spanish beds and elegant old works of art from the 15th century, woodworking. And the fellow in the picture was John Lennon. So in other words, he went from the dead to the bed, I guess. Old Spanish bed. So since my father, who had lived in that apartment before John and Yoko lived in that apartment, isn't dead either, I guess it's a tradition with that apartment to die Hollywood death artificially and just continue on your life with some other name or names. This island is Manhattan, yes? We wear many hats.
Reside in Erebus, along with Maggie's children, her puppies, and her deities. But if Robert Ryan was Maggie's father, then who is Hemera, the man who raised her and who lurked near the site where the puppies were born? Fortunately, Maggie does have less elusive contacts. After hearing for weeks about Maggie's Upper East Side friend, Katina, I finally meet her.
Anyway, oh, I'm so happy to see you. I'm happy to see you. God, we were all going to leave notes for each other behind phones and stuff.
I thought you'd be,
I'm late. I'm late because I was on the phone this morning. I called those two people to make sure. I went up to the vet, and the vet said yes, the dogs could go into a home, even though there's another dog. They're not contagious. I mean, they're not contagious. Once they're on antibiotics, they're okay.
they need a little care, that's all.
They're fine.
They caught it real fast.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, because of the weather. So Lucy's giving them the antibiotic, and they have
A few days ago, when the puppies were sick, Maggie permitted Katina to take them to a local animal clinic for adoption. Now Katina wants Maggie to get Mick a little spayed.
She says, you've got to do that.
She's been talking about it all morning.
Who? She?
Mick a
Okay,
little?
well, I'm calling her today. I didn't have a chance to do it last night. Had to go watch my husband perform Richard III last night.
Oh, yeah? Was that opening?
No, it was just a performance. One of the performances. I hadn't seen it yet.
Oh, yeah?
So I went over to the Riverside.
Oh.
Winter is becoming so severe that Maggie is forced to move into an abandoned workman's shed in the park. She calls her new home Sugar Shack. Having a home makes it easier to receive things, and I'm surprised by the sudden accumulation of Maggie's household.
This is Jill St. John's little jacket. She came by and blessed us with all the little extras that we needed. Oh, goody, goody.
Oh my God, wait a minute. Got a hold.
So what? How long have you been homeless?
No, but I mean, you know, I didn't want to give you nothing raggedy like that.
This is all a fantasy set, you know. There's a pool right over there where the dogs are. You dig a pool and the horses come down the hill and go into the pool and have their arthritis treated.
All right, doggies, let's go. Lay down. You got 2 seconds to lay down.
Maggie might fantasize Sugar Shack as an outdoor animal hospital, but to me it's a frozen wastefill in Central Park. Katina visits often, bringing Maggie food and other supplies. One day, Katina arrives with Joan Culpepper, a psychic soul reader from Gatlinburg, Tennessee. In Joan's view, Maggie might be the victim of negative spirit entities. Joan wants to contact the aggressors and, if possible, ask them a few questions. One evening, Joan, Maggie, and the spirit entities are all invited to Katina's Upper East Side apartment. Joan goes into frequency.
In 6 of your previous incarnations, in the awakening state of the totality of who and what you are, which is 5th dimensional in nature, this awakening took place at a very young and very early age. And as this awakening vibration began to take place, you literally would see pictures and flashes and hear voices and ideas and concepts. This traumatized you in all 5 of these lifetimes. You at the 4th dimensional facade soul level, you became very traumatized by this and were placed in a position of the family members around you of believing that there was something very, very wrong with you.
Whatever the relevance of the 4th dimensional facade soul level, the session with Joan seems to provoke memories in Maggie. I learn more about Hamera, the man who had allegedly kidnapped and raised her. His wife, Maggie explains, is Eris, the Greek goddess of discord. Maggie and Eris are not friends.
It was just a matter of the goddess Eris being jealous to the death. Jealousy is poo. There's no room for jealousy.
Did she beat you? Did she neglect you? Did she...
Nope, she played it by the rules. She did everything right, except that by the time I hit puberty, she was hitting menopause, and boy, did she lay it on thick. She let it be known that she, underneath all the smiling, she hated me. So, you know, I had wanted to be a loving daughter, and by the time I was 14, which is when Tom Cogan revealed that my mother was Maureen O'Sullivan, in a moment when he, kissing me on the cheek, said, "You're getting to look more like your mother every day." And Mrs. Cogan walked through the hall and said, "Oh, she doesn't look like me at all." And he said, "No, she looks like Maureen O'Sullivan." And Mrs. Cogan went, "Whoa!" and walked into the kitchen. We had a very small hall, by the way. All this didn't take much time.
After knowing me for 6.5 months, Maggie finally reveals her family name. Humera and Iris are Mr. and Mrs. Cogan of New Hyde Park, New York.
Oh, look at all those other dogs. I wonder if they've discovered the other dogs.
At Sugar Shack, Maggie repeats an address to me several times. It must be the Cogans' retirement home. I'm convinced that Maggie is asking me to contact them. When I call, the woman who answers says she's Maggie's mother. She hasn't seen Maggie in more than 4 years and is surprised to learn that Maggie's homeless. After unsuccessful attempts to get her daughter committed, Mrs. Cogan says she's given up. Yet she adds that Maggie can come home anytime she wants to. I spend a family Christmas in California. My son, Peter, takes center stage. When I return to New York, I'm surprised to learn that a number of city agencies have finally intervened in Maggie's plight. A coalition force drawn from the Parks Department, the Sanitation Department, the ASPCA, and the Police Department knocked down Sugar Shack. Katina was there when it happened.
That shack was home, and to have someone come in and destroy it in front of your eyes, he said, it's an extraordinary primal experience of just a really, I mean, that you're home. It would be somebody coming in and setting your house on fire, just evicting you. I mean, it's an eviction and it's your home, whether it's a shack in Central Park or an apartment on Fifth Avenue. It's still home, and she had made it into her home, and they just came with axes, big axes, and were chopping it down. And she dealt with it brilliantly. She dealt with it brilliantly, I thought.
Maggie is exiled from Erebus. She's gone to Long Island City, just across the East River from Manhattan, where friends have found her an apartment. Now installed at 9th Street and 35th Avenue, Maggie is able to discuss her recent eviction with humor.
Actually, what happened is the police descended upon us with the ASPCA and somebody else, I guess the Parks Enforcement Patrol, and the Department of Sanitation, and several sledgehammers, and a few garbage men. And there was that boop, 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 you know, that sound from the garbage truck when it's backing up?
Yeah.
You've heard that.
And they just...
And the man said, "Ah!"
Because natural gas doesn't have any odor until we add it to it, so that's why they do that, so you will smell it.
So you'll wake up?
Yep, yeah, hopefully. Okay, the super's calling the landlord now, so he's going to take care of it, and when it's done, we'll be back.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank
Good luck.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I meant to ask Maggie about something Mrs. Kogan had proudly told me. That Maggie had achieved success as one of the first women carriage drivers in Central Park. Maggie had even been interviewed by Hugh Downs on the Today Show in the 1960s. But I postponed telling Maggie about my conversation with Mrs. Kogan because she seems preoccupied by the apartment and busy introducing herself to her new neighbors.
There's Jason.
That one's cuter. It's cute.
She's a Chihuahua. Are you Jason's sister? No, you're not related.
Oh, I got to go crack.
You're certainly nice children. It was nice talking to you. What dog? What dog? I don't see any dog.
I search everywhere for Maggie's appearance on the Today Show, which aired on June 27, 1968. I called television stations and libraries all over the country. Apparently, the segment was destroyed. But when I look in the National Archives in Washington, D.C., I have a surprise.
In New York, 22-year-old Maggie Kogan starts her workday by harnessing her horse, Batman. She is one of 4 female horse and carriage drivers who take passengers for sightseeing trips in and around Manhattan's famous Central Park. Maggie's passengers will pay anywhere from $5 to $7 for an average trip, depending on the length of time. A carriage ride in New York is like a gondola ride in Venice, a must. Some drivers earn up to $2,000 a year. Maggie is careful to point out all important statues, buildings, and other landmarks during the ride. Maggie is never upset by barking dogs, angry motorists, or teasing youngsters. Once around the park, Maggie, and don't spare the horse, you're one woman who can't be called a backseat driver.
How did Maggie go from circling Central Park in a carriage to living there 20 years later? As I struggle to piece together Maggie's past, she continues to straighten out the details of indoor living.
Uh-oh, 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 little dogs. Little dogs.
The apartment is further evidence of Maggie's knack for attracting generosity. I learned that friends of Maggie are sharing her rent with a federal aid program called SSI. But one formality remains. To qualify for the government money, Maggie has to persuade a shrink in Manhattan of the very thing which she herself doesn't believe, that her voices are hallucinations. Will she concede psychiatric disability? I'm not allowed into the shrink's office.
He asked if I'd ever been in a psychiatric hospital, and I named Hillside Hospital. He asked the dates. I gave him the dates. And he asked me if why I had been put there, and I told him because people wanted me to go there. I'm such an obliging character. And then he asked if I had heard any voices. I said yes. What were they like? And I didn't know quite what to say because they're romantic voices, and it's a conversation I've been having for 20 years with someone. And it was over. Just like that. And he wasn't interested in anything other than the questions he asked, which he asks everyone, I guess. I don't think there was any difference in the questions he asked me from the questions he asked 15 or 20 other people before lunch. And 30 or 40 after.
stretch. You let go of the buttock, stretch. And then from the neck till your feet. Stretch your arms in back of your head. In back of your head. There. And slide down until you're flat on your back. Keep the legs down. Right, and open up. Stretch, stretch. Don't hold your toes. Feet, both feet. Right, feet, neck, feet. Head up, both.
I'm continually surprised by the extent of Maggie's social network. Edwige Val, whom she'd also met in Central Park, has enrolled Maggie in her Times Square gymnastic workshop.
The tension of sleeping in a dangerous environment had me sleeping in such positions and with such tension that I knocked my posture way out. And also carrying the pack, which wasn't always weighted right, and it was always overloaded, threw my balance off.
And open.
This Olympic workout throws everything back in line, and while it's getting me back in shape, back in getting my posture worked on so that it's more like it should be rather than this twisted thing I had. I was all twisted. My sciatic nerve became jarred or something. I can't figure out what happened, but boy, hell on earth is this thick band of fire down my leg.
Maggie has moved from 843 acres to 4 small rooms. To receive SSI, she's agreed to leave Eris, Hemera, and Jupiter behind. Now, to please her landlady, Maggie must make her family even smaller.
And you're going to wow them with your long black nails.
I'm gonna be lonely.
I know.
It's gonna be fine. Yes, it's gonna be fine.
Boy, he's a happy one.
It's gonna be fine. Yeah.
He behaved himself into the best situation.
It's gonna be great.
Yo, Buster, get that off of me. Yo! Will you get this thing off of me?
She's not gonna be an actress, God knows.
Jesus. Ow!
Audrey, listen to Audrey. Did you hear what Maggie said?
Prince William is not mine.
He is.
You sure?
Yes, that's the surprise. Audrey, are you happy about this?
Yes.
Are you really happy?
Yes. Hug your mom more.
No, it's okay.
Get that thing off of us.
I'm gonna hug your mom, because now I know my baby's safe. I spent all that time making sure he's perfect. He's terrific.
2 days later, Mick Little goes south. Maggie's friends, Charles and Lynn, send Mick Little to New Orleans on a jet. Charles's parents have agreed to adopt her. Maggie sends along a letter of introduction.
Dear new parents of Mick Little pups, congratulations. Mick Little is a fine and spunky, charismatic, funny dog. Lynn understands her better than I do in some respects, and I'm confident she'll be happy with y'all. On December 7th, 1988, there was an earthquake in Armenia while Gorbachev was in New York City, and friends and I were at Rockefeller Plaza seeing him. The next afternoon, Maya gave birth to 8 puppies, the 5th of which had to be hand-delivered. She was the only light-colored one, and I named her after Mikhail Gorbachev. This little piece of history will help you see into Mick a little, and we hope you will keep us informed of her silliness, for whose first birthday we received a 1-month vacation in a shanty in Central Park. For her next birthday, she may even take the cake, who knows. Yours truly, Maggie.
A few days later, Maggie's reservations about having parted with 2 dogs begin to surface. She mourns Mick Little's departure on the bank of the East River. Maggie seems edgy. Tension mounts when I finally tell Maggie that I've spoken with Mrs. Cogan. Although Maggie admits having wanted me to contact Mrs. Cogan at Christmas, she now is upset that I actually consulted the woman she calls Iris, the goddess of discord.
And what am I upset about? I'm upset because when I tell you the truth about that I was born in Scotland and I'm the daughter of these 2 particular people and these 3 particular people, 2 fellows and a woman, and that they had shipped me, one of them or some of them had shipped me from where I was born to where I was claimed to be the child of 2 other people. You doubt that this really happened.
I agree never to contact Mrs. Cogan again. Yet Maggie gives me a lot of new information, including the name of a high school classmate from New Hyde Park, New York. Despite her anger, she wants me to continue. Maggie tells me that she was raised here, in the suburb of New York City, with 2 brothers and a sister. While Mr. Cogan worked in wholesale food distribution, Maggie went to the local high school. Joanne Bergbaum was a friend and classmate.
She did stand out as looking just a little bit different and yet very mainstream also, which is really what my sense of Maggie is in regard to everything. She was very much part of everything that everybody else was part of, and yet there was something that was just a little bit, I was going to use the word off-center, but I don't really mean off-center. Just a little bit different from the mainstream, something that made us take notice of her. I guess that's a better way to put it. She was outstanding in her own right, always. And I think that's why I was surprised when I went back and started looking in the yearbook to find out that she was part of the kick line and that she was wearing a kick line uniform frequently with all the other girls who were wearing the kick line uniform, because I guess I had forgotten that part of Maggie. I remembered all the club involvement and all the service organizations and had really forgotten that she was a Romanette, somebody on the kick line, somebody who was a real rah-rah person out there at the football games. And I think that I respected Maggie's mind so much that I probably didn't remember that part of her that was such a typical high school girl in the early 1960s.
Combining the evidence from Joanne Bergbaum, Mrs. Cogan, and Maggie, I managed to unravel more of her chronology. After graduating from high school in 1961, Maggie attended half a dozen colleges over a 4-year period.
I had been told repeatedly that I couldn't do anything, so I thought, well, I can't do anything but go to college. So I just went to one college, and then I went to another college, and I kept going to colleges, having nervous breakdowns, being anxious, being upset, trying to find myself, but Life magazine was saying that the whole generation was doing the same thing that I was doing, so I figured I was in step with the times.
In the mid-60s, Maggie abandoned college and found her rare vocation in New York City. By 1968, Maggie was driving sightseers through the cultural profusion of the 60s. For 5 years, Maggie prospered as a carriage driver.
Then I started buying my own carriage. Gee, it was a beautiful outfit. It was a little shaky. The shafts weren't the right shafts. But it was mine, and it was wonderful to have a horse who talked. Well, in 1969, if you weren't fighting in a war on the other side of the world, you had this obligation to explore the other world, way up high. So after LSD told me to relinquish all material goods to the common wheel somewhere, I let it all slip through my fingers. The important thing seemed to be to continue this marriage with Jupiter, which was millions of years old, and I hadn't seen him in 700 years. So we got on with the business of continuing the dynasty.
Who is this Jupiter who lifted Maggie from her Central Park carriage and exiled her to the airwaves? What man deserves this powerful name? Worshipping him, Maggie was stripped at some point of her children and her livelihood. 15 years later, she's still engaged in what she calls a romantic conversation with him. As I wander through the park, I sense Jupiter's presence here. Herculesa, the runt of Mickelittle's litter, proved to be deaf, so her disappointed owner has returned her, much to Maggie's delight.
Because like that, I just... Oh, Boris, go eat your Tylenol. Get away from him. Oh, Boris. I got a spoon.
Watching Maggie dote on her dogs, I am more and more curious about her actual children. Back in December, Mrs. Cogan told me that Maggie had been married twice. Though Maggie claims to have 5 children, Mrs. Cogan only knows of 2, Michael and Justin. Maggie says that she met Michael's father, Richard, when he rode in her carriage in the spring of 1968. He was a tourist. They had a brief affair, and Michael was born. Richard gave Maggie child support and disappeared. Mrs. Cogan remembers him fondly. He was a Harvard MBA. Justin's paternity is more vague. Maggie says he was conceived in the summer of 1970.
Well, the summer of 70, and the music started to sound familiar because I used to hear it coming out of Jupiter's head before it ever got down to vinyl or anything. So like I was hearing all this Led Zeppelin stuff in my life before it was actually recorded.
Who is Jupiter?
Yeah, that's a good question. He's very tall, and he said his name was John. Maybe he's a drummer. He's a musician. And later on, he was a disc jockey. He still is a disc jockey. Just can't figure out which one. Because if they told me that John wasn't the father of Justin Case, I probably would have died. Because I was so in love with John, and one of the Johns, or 2 of the Johns, or 3 of the Johns, or 4 of the Johns had said, "I don't love you, Maggie." So I was in a heartbroken condition through the first trimester. Thanks.
At last, Maggie has revealed Jupiter's Christian name. This man, John, seems to have abandoned Maggie before Justin's birth, with very harsh consequences.
The first voices I heard were in September of 1970, when this fellow, John, was becoming real scarce. I had nothing to do. My husband was off in the airwaves somewhere, so I didn't have him, so I had these games I'd play. I had to do something. I was desperate. And first thing I ever, well, it wasn't the first. One of the first things I ever heard them say was, "Don't wash your hair," because I used to wash my hair all the time, and I felt very comforted by the fact that even though he wasn't there physically, I could hear him. And then there was that wonderful record, Radar Love by Golden Earring, because the voices I could hear were a golden ear ring. And Radar Love was how we kept our marriage together.
Then, up that side. Oops, do you see how much smoother it is? Yeah, better.
Not only has Jupiter proved to be real, but I receive a letter from Robert Ryan's daughter, Lisa, confirming that they knew Maggie well. Back in the classless society of Central Park in the 1960s, Maggie befriended Lisa. They influenced one another. Lisa took up carriage driving. Maggie became a frequent guest at the Dakota.
Robert Ryan and I passed each other in the hall, and my bone marrow began to sizzle in a way that I understood that he and I, somewhere out there, had once upon a time been the same thing. So therefore, we're doing the same thing, even if he's taking the longest road and I'm taking the crookedest.
Videotape.
Well, I'm going to try and establish the means of propulsion. Is it propelled by an internal combustion gasoline engine?
An internal combustion gasoline engine?
Go ahead. Right.
No. Good. Absolutely not. That's 3 down. We go to America.
Is there a live animal connected to it? Yes, that's what I thought. Is it a horse?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to say, is it one of the carriages in Central Park?
Yes. I'm sorry. What do you charge? What do you charge for one trip through Central Park?
$7.
And why would a lovely young lady choose this particular type of profession? What made you get into this?
Well, I type 18 words a minute with 3 mistakes, so that's...
That's out.
I don't like to be indoors. I love horses, and I'm interested in antiques. Everything went together. And
so you have an antique buggy and a horse, and you're outside in Central Park making $7 an hour. And
no, I'm not 7. That doesn't average out to 7 an hour.
But it's pretty good.
Well, all right.
Let's show them exactly what she looks like when she's doing this in Central Park. We have a picture here, and let's let our audience show you exactly what she looks like.
I wish we could. Where's the man?
There you are, all decked out in your garb and atop your buggy. And you've been doing this now for about 2 years?
2.5.
2.5 years. And your future is in Central Park, right?
Could be.
Could be. All right, Maggie, thank you so much for being with us on What's My Line.
I'm struck by the contrast between Maggie's poise in her 1968 television appearance and her predicament only a few years later. By the spring of 1972, she was an unemployed single mother of 2 living in Harlem. Robert Ryan and her lover John were now absent. Saturn and Jupiter were larger than ever. Comforted only by Radar Love, she found raising her children an increasingly awesome task, especially Michael.
He was the child who pulled the heavy psychic stuff on me. So when he was 2.5, he was a little 2.5-year-old baby behind me on 105th Street. And I looked around to look at this little cute 2-year-old, and all of a sudden, he was St. Michael, the archangel, in full regalia. He had a sword, he had wings, he had a crown, he had a long golden white robe with gold edging, epaulets. What else did he have? Well, he was over 6 feet tall. Maybe he was about 6 feet tall. And his eyes were so cold and so greenish gray, just looking at me saying, "When I leave, don't follow." And then it was over. A month later, he left. I had been raped, I had been robbed, I had been the whole, you know, holy macaroni thing. And the Cogans came to take him to New Hyde Park with just in case. And he just casually waved goodbye and right out the door. And that was the end of his being my son. I wasn't able to hold the scene together, and it was obvious to me I wasn't supposed to. And I went bouncing around the city trying to find another place to live, but the cards were stacked in such a way that Elizabeth from Houston came up to see me and said, "Hey girl, let's hitch back to Texas." And so I went for a 2-week jaunt to Texas and didn't come back for 3 or 4 years.
What drove Maggie to make the fateful decision to leave her very young children with the Cogans and stay away for so long? She cites many reasons, among them Jupiter's absence, St. Michael's command, tensions with the Cogans, and a broken heart. But whatever forces were working on Maggie, one thing remained certain. By staying in Texas, she was losing her children. The Cogans returned Michael to his father and put Justin up for adoption. When Maggie returned to New York on July 7th, 1975, both her children were gone. 12 days later, she was institutionalized at Hillside Hospital on Long Island. She remained there for 4 months. Maggie was on Jupiter's frequency. I know that many things happened to Maggie after her discharge from Hillside Hospital. She was a roommate of Lisa Ryan's and returned briefly to carriage driving. She left New York and then lived with the Cogans for 4 years. But all these arrangements were fragile and doomed. When Maggie returned from Texas to find her children gone, she began her descent into that region where I first encountered her.
She's the daughter of the tricky one. We're in the shadow of the living room.
That region in the shadow of Robert Ryan's Dakota, where Maggie could keep in contact with Jupiter, Saturn, Hemera, St. Michael, and Justin. Maggie had taken all the necessary steps to reassemble her family in Erebus. With Maggie, I'd entered a secret world that was as intricate as anything I'd ever encountered. But why did she create such a complicated language to express herself? It occurs to me that Maggie's mythology is her self-portrait. On the canvas, the figures of Jupiter, Hera, and Saturn loom larger than life. From a distance, Maggie can see herself framed in this timeless drama. I wonder if the distance also allows Maggie to survive the pain and trauma of losing her children. Events in Maggie's life keep hinting at a neat cinematic solution, but don't count on it. Maggie enrolls in a mental health clinic, but drops out after several weeks. She says she wants to get a job, but she can't unleash herself from all her dogs. A year ago, the adoption of Mick Little's puppies filled me with optimism. But Maggie has collected more strays. One of them has a litter. The cycle repeats. I'm busy too. I don't know what to make of it, but Maggie predicted that my daughter, Ramona, would be born on the same day as her son, Michael, September 13th. She was even more specific. She said at 4:30. Astoundingly, Maggie was right. Had I taken her more seriously, I would not have had to deliver my daughter in the back seat of a taxi cab. Maggie tells me a little more about Jupiter. He also drove a carriage in Central Park. He stood over 6 feet tall and weighed 210 pounds in the summer of 1970. I considered trying to find Maggie's Jupiter and Maggie's children. But they've been living separately from her for more than 20 years. What do they know about her, and how would they react to meeting her? How would Maggie react to meeting them? Maybe fate can orchestrate a family reunion, but I can't. I decide to go no further.
I met some kids in Long Island City. Jamal is in kindergarten from 8-something to nearly 3 p.m. He loves it, and his favorite thing to do is draw and play with words and numbers. Last night I gazed at him sitting beside me and became aware of a brimming intelligence. I could nearly hear the sound of his brain, and his brother Malik is so indescribably darling. Maybe he can save the world with his charm, and Jamal can devise the scheme. They're all coming with us to a big horse farm. Let's keep it practical so we can afford to give every kid a pony.
Dear Maggie, it's 2 years since we met. When I met you, you had 4 dogs. Now you have 8. When I met you, you lived outdoors. Now you have an address. In Central Park, you used to say that Jupiter would someday arrive on a white horse. Now you're not sure he'll ever come. You once told me that Robert Ryan was 100 feet tall. More recently, you saw him on 80th Street, and he was human size. Like the rest of us, you examine your assumptions. You part with some of them, modify some, and cling to others. When I met you, you dreamed of living on a horse farm. You still do.